Hey everyone, Jared Sandler here with you, and we are now catching up with Bobby Wilson, former Ranger great, once hit two grand slams in a week, and now oversees the catching throughout the entire organization and does more than just that. Bobby, happy off season to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's getting close, man. Getting close, getting ready to go here soon.
And it feels like the season's so far away, but pitchers and catchers will report there in early February, and now with a lot of the offseason activity, it does seem like things kind of pick up. And the Rangers have been active already, acquiring three guys who figured to factor into the rotation: Jacob deGrom, the biggest name; Andrew Heaney; and Jake Odorizzi. Odorizzi was acquired in a trade. deGrom and Heaney free agent signings. Let's start with Jacob deGrom. Bobby, uh, you've obviously seen this guy work. I don't know. Do you have any sort of relationship or any sort of direct familiarity with Jacob deGrom?
Well, I faced him in the minor leagues, so I've definitely seen him pitch. When he was in Las Vegas, I was in Reno, and they actually had a three-headed monster there. It was deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, and Montero were there at the same time, three starters. And I can remember everybody was goo goo gaga over Syndergaard and Montero, and I can remember saying like, no, I think the deGrom guy, I think he's going to be the best out of the group. And thankfully my eyes didn't lie to me because he's definitely special. And looking forward to getting around him more to see what makes him tick, and that'll be part of what our catchers do. I know that they've already reached out to him. I've reached out to him just to welcome him. But like you said, with the offseason, with signing him, this is when it all starts, right? This is when we start to build our relationship. And with our catchers, it's the number one thing. Pitcher-catcher relationship, pitcher-catcher communication is the number one pillar set up in our catching department and the way that we set everything up with our pillars. So the guys have already started that communication with them, and we're going to see where he's at in spring to get a little bit more familiar with him.
All right. So with deGrom and Heaney and Odorizzi, what are those initial conversations like right now? Because Jonah and the rest of the catching crew, presumably they're not dropping down and catching bullpens right now, talking shop. So are they just kind of developing that personal relationship, or are they already talking X's and O's and strategy and trying to figure out what these guys like and don't like?
It's going to be more personal at this point. It's going to be, how's your family doing? What are you doing for the holidays? Because pitchers, if you don't show them that you truly care about them, they're going to be out on you. So it's for catchers, it's truly getting to know them away from the field and building that personal relationship. Because honestly, when you get down to it and you get into the game and you put down a finger, that pitcher has to know that he trusts what you're doing and he trusts that you have his best interest at heart. So that relationship is built, before we even catch a bullpen. It's built in between their starts. It's built after their start when we have conversations at the bucket during BP the next day, which I call the water cooler time, to where we talk to them about, hey, what could we have done better for you? And at the end of the day, it's about the pitching. I mean, it really is. And you see CY going after pitching this offseason because, pitching is what wins you championships.
As far as your conversations with the catcher, so hey, the Rangers signed Jacob deGrom. You're reaching out to Jonah and telling him what, or are you kind of giving him space to operate without you kind of watching over him?
No, I let him go. It's we talked about it. Hey, it's exciting, and obviously Jonah with deGrom, who uh, has pretty good control, command. Talking about what that means for him as well, as well as he's done with his receiving stuff. So, it's basically, hey, here's his number. You guys do what you do. You reach out, you make the connection, you start building the relationship. And that's something that as I don't like talking about myself personally, but as a journeyman catcher, that was something that I had to do every offseason. Because rarely did I go back to the same team 2 years in a row. I think I did it with Texas and with Anaheim, the two teams that I did do that with. But all the other teams, you have to do your homework. You have to know, how does this guy pitch? How does he use his pitches, so that when you do get to that first bullpen, and something that we do in our catching program is we make sure that our guys are prepared with how they pitch, what they're trying to do, what they're working on, what they need to get better at, and kind of target those things in their bullpens. But this time in the offseason is spent watching video. Okay, this is how DeGrom pitch. This is what he likes to do. Okay. And now once I get into it, I have a conversation. Now he goes, oh, this guy actually does care about me because he watched video. So that'll be part of this off season moving into pitcher catcher report date.
I'm just curious. You mentioned you played for a number of different teams. The Rangers in 2015, you arrived right around the same time that Cole Hamels was traded to the Rangers.
Same day.
Same day. Okay. So, and I imagine you had been on a team before, though, when they made an acquisition, or maybe over an off season. The Angels, while you were with the Angels, they made some big offseason moves, acquiring Josh Hamilton and Albert Pujols, for instance. What does that do? Like, what are those conversations amongst teammates when Jacob deGrom is added to a team, when a guy of his caliber? I mean, guys side texting like, oh, can you believe this? And how does that kind of boost the morale, especially for a team like the Rangers? Lost 100 games 2 years ago, made a little bit of improvement last year, but haven't really sniffed competitive baseball in September now for a few years.
Yeah, I think there's definitely excitement, right? There's excitement with Corey and Marcus last year, but we still knew that we had to add pieces. So I think it's fair to say that everybody in our organization, our fans, our players, they're sick of losing. We were sick of it. And I've bought into CY's vision. Like, no, we're going to win. It's not, oh, I hope we win, or man, I wish we could win some more games. Like, no, we're going to win, and we're going to figure out a way to win. And I think everybody has bought into that vision. Obviously, even with the coaching staff that we've brought along, with Boch, with Venable, with Mad Dog, and Donnie and Timmy, and the guys that we've had here before, is we're ready to win. And this is it's time. It's time for the Texas Rangers to, put their flag in the ground and say, okay, we're going to win. We're going to be dominant. We're going to do what it takes to win baseball games and ultimately win a world championship. And that's just kind of where we're at. There's no, I wish, I want. It's no, we're going to do it.
All right. We mentioned the command and the control with DeGrom. A lot's been made of the velocity. He has reliever type velocity that more or less is sustained over the course of a start, which is, absolutely absurd. There's a reason he's been so dominant when he's been on the mound. But is there anything else that really stands out to you about what makes him so special?
Yeah, I think it's pitching in his lanes. He does that really well. His fastball slider has a curveball that he mostly uses to lefties, and his changeup. So I think him pitching in lanes, and from watching video, seeing him pitch to his glove side lane quite a bit. And if you talk to any hitting coach, like, one of the biggest problems for hitters is pitchers that pitch in lanes that have multiple pitches that come off of that lane. If that makes sense. So, with him, with his fastball with high velo and then his slider at high velo, he can actually triple that up with his changeup if he wants to off that same lane. So I know he's kind of experimented with a cutter a little bit, but that's a nightmare for every hitter, for every hitting coach, is somebody who pitches off one lane but has multiple pitches come off that lane. And you see the best pitchers in the game, they all do that. They all tunnel their pitches. And even here in his press conference the other day about his slider, right? He tries to make his slider look like a fastball for 59 feet, I think he said. Like, that's pitching, and those guys are the toughest to handle. But obviously the velocity, like, good luck. 100 miles an hour, is not easy to handle. And then a 93-mile-an-hour slider back in my day, I'm gonna be the old guy, back in my day, 93 was a fastball, not a slider.
Yeah.
So he's definitely special, and I think we're all excited to get around him.
You know who asked him that question about the slider, right?
I think it was you, wasn't it?
It was. I am fascinated by that pitch, and I can't wait to watch him and watch it not only just once, but over the course of a start and how hitters react. And you know, we haven't gotten to see him much, right? You know, he wasn't an American League guy. He's not that you see a whole lot necessarily in spring training, but you know, he was a Grapefruit League guy. So, you know, even any chance to just see him try and knock off the rust for 3 innings, never had that opportunity. So I'm really excited to see him. Now, we have seen a lot of Andrew Heaney. We've seen a decent amount of Jake Odorizzi. Don't want to overlook those additions because pitching depth is huge. I think, you know, we have seen this play out year after year after year. Any year you do not have pitching depth, you always get exposed. And sometimes you can have pitching depth on a Monday, and then, you know, 2 days later, another injury, and a guy who just can't quite figure it out. And all of a sudden you don't have pitching depth. So even when you have pitching depth, you maybe don't have pitching depth. But Odorizzi and Heaney, let's start with Jake Odorizzi, because I know you know him really, really well. You played with this guy. What can you tell us about Jake, and maybe what gives you the confidence that, you know, after a little bit of a down year, he can bounce back and take form of a guy who the Rangers, it seemed like for about 2-3 straight years, were interested in acquiring mid-season in a trade when he was pitching for Tampa.
Yeah, so I have some track with Odorizzi for sure. And I want to tell this quick story is I was in Tampa, went to Tampa, and I was catching Jake, and we just couldn't get on the same page for whatever reason. And, you know, this is part of that pitcher catcher relationship that I always talk about. Again, it's our number one pillar. It's the most important thing to me. We just couldn't get on the same page. So I'll never forget, we're in Chicago, and, you know, we kind of look at each other, we're sitting on the bench, and they have the big Italian beef sub on the back of the dugout there at that time. I think it was the Buena Italian beef sub. So we couldn't get on the same page, right? So we kind of look at each other and we're like, hey, let's go get an Italian beef sub tomorrow and just talk, you know? So I said, that sounds great. That sounds like a great idea. First off, I love to eat, so that's even better. We're in Chicago. So we wind up going and getting a Italian beef sub, sitting there talking at lunch. And we just kind of talked through some things. And from that point on, we were on the same page. And from that point on, we've been in constant contact with each other. And we truly built a lasting friendship, which is cool, because from two guys that, you know, different backgrounds, couldn't get on the same page, like didn't work well together. All it took was for us to say, hey, let's get away from the field and let's just talk about whatever. Doesn't have to be baseball necessarily, but that opened up the lane for us to start getting back into how can I be better for him, you know, and he saw that I cared about him. I wanted to spend time with him. And again, we just built that relationship to where, you know, it's safe to say I can call him one of my better friends, you know, in life and in baseball. But with Odorizzi, like, you know, understanding how guys want to pitch for Odo, it was, I didn't understand that he didn't necessarily love pitching in as much. So basically what he would tell me is like, hey, just give me a fastball away, get set up away, and then let me rip this, you know, 20 to 22 inch vertical fastball. Sometimes it might be down the way. Other times it's probably going to be up. Sometimes it's going to carry arm side. You know, it's kind of a big spray for a catcher, but that's what he wanted, you know, and that was something that I was missing. So understanding how he was trying to do that, again, made our life easier. And then obviously, you know, the splitter working off that, or the Vulcan. For those of you that don't know what the Vulcan is, it's basically just, you know, splitting your finger that way, and basically holds the ball right in here and kind of goes that way, compared to the traditional circle change, which is that. You know, so basically there it is. The Vulcan just splits it, and basically it plays like a split finger instead of going that way. Yeah. So that's kind of the changeup grip that he throws. You know, obviously has this cutter slider and a curveball that he uses early. So That'll be something going into spring again, like our, Jonah, Mitch, Sam Huff, they're going to have to learn him, understand what makes him tick. So I'm looking forward to it. And then Heaney, of course, I've faced him. It's a lot of funk, man. It's a lot of funk. Fastball, slider, changeup. Fastball's got carry. And again, it's not the 22-inch vertical carry, but it's a carry that with the funk, with the run, it's tough to handle. And, up to 95, 96, was he 93, 96, somewhere in that range. And obviously the slider. But again, like, don't know him well, looking forward to getting around him and hearing what he has to say and what makes him tick. So, it's exciting times right now. It really is, because, you saw it with Martin Perez last year. Every time he pitched, you saw the intensity level crank up a little bit, because you don't want to let Martin down. I think you're going to see that more so when you have DeGrom on the mound, when you have Heaney on the mound, when you have Odorizzi on the mound. With John Gray, there's 5 guys in that rotation as of right now. And not to leave out, Dane or Glenn Otto or Cole, but you're going to see that heightened intensity now when these guys are on the mound. And that's kind of what I've seen over the last couple of years, is there's been a letdown when there hasn't been the number one on the mound. So with that depth, you're going to see, I feel you see that intensity, that attention to details a little bit higher.
All right, one last thing I want to ask you about, and I guess this can apply to both Odorizzi and Heaney, but just specifically looking at Heaney, the Dodgers had him last year. He had this elite strikeout rate. He struck out nearly 14 batters per 9 innings, which is absurd. But it was in a smaller sample. They did it in bursts. It seems like was used kind of as that hybrid starter these days, where he started all but I think 2 of his outings, but there were outings where he went 4 innings, and 4 innings, no runs, 1 or 2 hits. So it wasn't like 4 innings because he was getting shelled, but they decided what was best in their eyes in using Andrew Heaney, was doing it in kind of that hybrid role. We're seeing that more and more. And we're also seeing, in response to that, more and more relievers who are multi-inning relievers. Taylor Hearn, for instance, fulfilled that role once he was moved to the bullpen last year. I'm just curious your thoughts. You grew up playing in hey, I want 7 innings out of the starter, setup man, closer, see you later, let's do it again tomorrow. But starters took pride in that. And I'm not saying Andrew Heaney doesn't take pride in that, but clearly the people calling the shots have felt like there's a winning formula for certain guys, not having them, push 100 pitches. Heaney didn't throw more than 90 pitches, I think all but 2 times. And a lot of times he was in that 70 or so pitch range. I'm just curious your thoughts on that, as someone who I know thinks about the game like a manager. And, as you think about the pieces that the team is putting together, just the evolution of how a starter is maybe utilized here in 2022, 2023.
Yeah, and to your point, it was, kind of the standard was if you pitch 200 innings and you get 10 wins, right? You get paid. That was kind of the standard. My first few years in the big leagues. At this point, it's, I think that analytics has played a huge role in that, understanding, averages, third time through the lineup. I think we've seen that. And I think it's tougher for hitters these days to adjust, right? The more that you see a guy, the more comfortable you get facing him. What his ball's doing more. I think with these guys kind of coming in, like you said, 2 inning spurts with the relievers, I think it's getting tougher for hitters to handle that. I really do, because, you might see that guy, but you're only going to see him once. And then that guy's generally going to be down 2 or 3 days before he pitches again. So it's not like, and in the playoffs, you see like, your 6, 7, 8, 9th inning guys, you'll see them every time throughout that series, whereas in the regular season, you might get Taylor Hearn for one series, and, you might not see him again for another whatever, 6, 7, 8 series down the road. So, and it's like, here you go. Here's your best bolt. Go ahead and get him, Taylor, for 2 innings at, 96 to 98. I just think that, like I said, the analytics have played a role in that. Understanding that averages, exit velocities, all that stuff kind of creeps up the more you see somebody. So, and honestly, like, we have more guys that are 95 plus too, as the old guy again, in my day, there wasn't, if you saw a reliever throwing 95 plus, he was the back end of the bullpen. Nowadays and it used to be, hey, let's get to the mop-up guy. Now it's like, no, we don't want the mop-up guy, because the mop-up guy is actually nastier than the closer because he's still trying to figure out how to pitch. So I would just say the increase in velocity and spin definitely plays a role in that. You have more guys in the bullpen that throw harder. Actually, all of them throw hard now. So like I said, you can somewhat protect them a little bit too, I think, with that. So again, analytics, medical protection, and then not seeing that guy as much. So that would be kind of my thoughts behind that right now.
Well, I'm looking forward to more conversations with you here over the course of the offseason, catching up with Bobby Wilson. We have tornado sirens going off here in DFW right now. So hopefully we'll duck and cover. And maybe it's just a warning to the rest of Major League Baseball that the Rangers mean business. How about that for like a corny kind of tie-in? Bobby, I understand you went to the match recently. Maybe next time we'll talk about that experience. We'll talk more baseball, I'm sure, as well, coming up. More conversations with Bobby Wilson. Bobby, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me, man. This is awesome. I love doing this with you.